So I'm gonna start building a brand new project, and this one is a bench, and not just any bench, it's going to be a storage bench that sort of looks like this. Obviously it's not going to be purple. My printer ran out of It's running low on a certain ink, so everything looks purple, but that's not going to be purple, obviously. Or maybe it'll be purple. Purple will be fun. But before we get started, if you are new here, I am Anika, and I am here to demystify DIY and inspire and empower you to build all of the things. I like to teach all my tutorials and keep all of my projects beginner friendly using minimal tools. So if that's for you, you are in the right place. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. And now let's get building. Now the bench is upholstered, and I found this beautiful fabric, it's a velvet fabric, and it's got this pattern on it. And once I saw this, I knew it had to be this. So we are actually going to start by making the upholstered top. And the reason I want to make the upholstered top first is because once that top is made, I can use the dimensions of the upholstered top and then make any adjustments to any of the other measurements as needed. So I do have the detailed plans available for you to build your own, and once I build this, I will have an idea of if there are any variations, and I will definitely make sure to update the plans. So let's start by upholstering the top, and then we'll take it from there. To cut down my plywood, I am using a table saw, but of course you can also use a circular saw with some straight edge guides. I am so glad that I built this table saw stand that has this extension wing that can help support these large sheets of plywood. And since I had the table saw already set up, I did also rip down boards that I need for the rest of the project. Okay, so here's the bench top. It is time to upholster it, and to upholster it, I'm going to start with foam. Foam can be pretty expensive, so here's a little tip. Get a foam mattress topper, and that's what this is. And it's pretty much the same thing. You can use it to do exactly the same thing, and it's so much cheaper. We are going to cut the foam about an inch bigger than the plywood on all sides, because what that's going to do is it's going to wrap around the edges of the plywood so you don't feel the sharp edges when you sit on it. I applied spray adhesive to the plywood and attached the foam to it, and then I wrapped the entire thing in batting using a staple gun. And now it's time for the upholstery fabric. As you attach, you want to make sure that you pull the fabric tight and staple it down, and make sure that the corners don't get too thick. So that is the upholstered top. Now, I can measure the exact size of this and adjust all of my aprons and the storage area accordingly. We're going to measure the length here. We are at about 15 3/4. So we're gonna use 15 3/4 for that. So the plans are meant for 15 inches. So all of the side things are 15 inches. So we're going to just change that to 15 3/4. And here is 37 inches. So I designed it for 36 inches, but I'm going to update the plans so that they are meant for 37 inches and 15 3/4. However, if after you upholster your top, if it ends up being slightly different, you have to take that into account. So definitely once the top is done, do all of the measurements, and then we can go ahead and cut the rest of the plywood and the boards and everything. Now that I have the final measurements, I cut down the plywood as well as the 2x2 and 1x2 boards to the size that I needed. And now let's go ahead and make some pocket holes. Now we are going to be making pocket holes in the 3/4 inch plywood as well as the 2x2 boards. Now you want to remember to change the settings on the pocket hole jig as well as the stop collar when you make pocket holes in the 3/4 inch boards versus the 2x2 boards. If you want to learn more about pocket holes and how they work, I have a bunch of resources and I will add a link to those in the description below. Now to put it all together, I'm going to start by building the panels that are going to build the box around the bench. So this is built using the 3/4 inch plywood and a 2x2 trim for the top edge and a 1x2 trim for the bottom edge. So I attached the plywood to the 2x2 using wood glue and pocket hole screws. And for the 1x2 trim, I applied wood glue, aligned and clamped it together, and added finish nails from the back side. And that is one of the panels. So I built a second long panel and then 2 short panels as well. Now it's time to put together the side frames. The first step is to attach the 2x2 legs to the top arm piece, and the pocket hole screws are going to be on the inside of this joint. So I clamped it and made sure everything was aligned before attaching. I have built both of the sides here, or started building both of the sides here. Now, before I go on to adding the storage area and the bottom legs and everything and completing this, I want to fill up these pocket holes, because once we add things in, it'll kind of get a little harder to fill the pocket holes in. So we're just gonna fill as we go so they're not visible in the end and we don't have to worry about it once we're done. To fill the pocket holes, I am using a 3/8 inch dowel, and I have a detailed tutorial on exactly how to fill pocket holes where I actually discuss 4 different techniques of filling pocket holes. This one here is my absolute favorite and go-to technique. So now I can go ahead and add the small panels onto the sides. Of course, I measured exactly where they were going to be and used wood glue and pocket hole screws. Now we are attaching plywood to 2x2s, and in that case, I'm going to use 1 1/4 inch pocket hole screws. But when I attach the 2x2 to the 2x2 boards, I'm going to use the 1.5 inch pocket hole screws. And finally, I also added the bottom board and made sure that the pocket holes were facing downwards or outwards, because these will be on the bottom of the bench and we don't have to worry about filling them up. A few more pocket hole screws to attach the panel to the other part of the legs, and we are done. And of course, I repeated that for a second side. I have both the sides done. Now, this is a good time to go ahead and fill up all of these pocket holes in here, because once it is built, it's going to be really hard to fill them. And because these pocket holes are going to be in the storage area, they don't really look great. Usually, any pocket hole that is hidden, like these ones on the bottom, I just let them be. But it's something that's going to be visible. I definitely want to try my best to fill them up. So we're gonna fill up these pocket holes on both of the sides. Also, I'm going to be filling up the pocket holes on the long sides, only the pocket holes that are connecting to the 2x2, these pocket holes here. These pocket holes, I still need to use them to connect, so we'll fill them up later. But right now, I can easily go ahead and fill these up. So that's what we're going to do. I have both of these long boards, the long aprons with pocket holes filled. All of these pocket holes are filled, and both of the sides have all of their pocket holes filled. Now I do want to mention something that you want to make sure that you pay attention to. As you sand, pay attention to how much you're sanding. Do not oversand, because plywood, the top layer is very, very thin and you can easily sand through. So I kind of got distracted. I wasn't paying attention. So I sort of sanded through some of this area, but that's okay. I'm planning to do like a dark stain, so hopefully it'll kind of get covered up. But pay attention to that and keep that in mind. But now all of the pocket holes over here are filled, and we can start to put it all together. And once I put it together, we can go ahead and once all of this is attached, I can fill these pocket holes as well. And now it's time to put it all together and assemble the bench. First step is the long side that I'm going to attach to one of the side frames. Once again, you want to remember to use 3/4 inch pocket hole screws for the plywood and 1.5 inch pocket hole screws for the 2x2. Next comes the bottom, which has pocket holes facing outside. So I attached this to the side frame as well as the long panel that I had just attached. And then I attached the third side to the bottom as well as the side panel. At every single step, I tried my best to clean up as much of the glue squeeze out as I could because I do not want that to interfere with my stain. And in the tight spaces, it can get really hard to clean up after the fact. And now it's time to add the final side. The best way to do this is to use gravity to help align as well as make sure everything stays in place as you are adding those pocket hole screws. And that's exactly what I did. And there, my friends, is the frame for the bench. Of course, I was really curious to see if the upholstered top was going to work well with this frame. So I tried that and everything looks good. Now it's time to take care of some of those pocket holes that are still left to be filled. And then I also decided to add a little bit of a round over to the top edges of the arms just to make them a little comfortable to hold. Of course, this is completely optional, and if you wanted, you could just run a sander over those edges and it would be not as sharp anymore. I sanded down the entire bench with 220 grit sandpaper, especially making sure to remove any of the glue residues. At the end of the arms, we have the end grain, which normally absorbs stain a lot more than edge grain, making the end grains look much darker. To combat that, I sanded the end grain down to 500 grit, and this helps reduce the amount of stain it absorbs, almost like the rest of the edge grain that has been sanded with 220 grit. Next, I wiped it all down with a tack cloth to remove all the dust, applied pre-stain conditioner, and then applied the stain. Now, once the stain was dry, I tried what the upholstered top looked like, and I did not like it at all. So I decided to give it a black stain, which actually, to be honest, was my first choice, but I had decided against it, and I'm glad I decided to go with the black stain. Once the stain was dry, I gave it a couple coats of top coat using a paint sprayer just because it was so much easier to get into all of the nooks and crannies. So now while the top coat is drying, I want to do one more thing to this bench seat before it's ready to attach. So all of this doesn't look really good, especially because we're going to be opening the bench. So I'm going to be adding this fabric right here. This is actually called a backing material. It's got this non-woven look. You must have seen this like under couches and stuff like that. So this is the material that I'm going to attach over here, and that's going to give it a little bit of a finished look. So I cut off any extra fabric that I could and attached the black fabric using the staple gun. And now it looks so much better. Now it's time to attach the hinge. I am using a piano hinge, but you could also use a set of regular hinges if you wanted to. So I started by attaching it to the box itself. And then to attach the top, I tried to first support it against my workbench to hold it in place while I attached it, but that was really not working. So I finally decided to lay everything on the side on my workbench, and this seemed to help, and I was able to attach the first screw into the top. Once I got that first screw in, all of the screws were pretty straightforward and easy to put in. And the lid works perfectly. It fits nice and it is a nice storage bench. Now, of course, we want to make sure that it is also safe, so I am adding these lid support hinges, which I have used multiple times in the past. I will add a link to the exact hinges that I am using in the description below. And that is it. That is the upholstered storage bench. It is the perfect mix of style, function, and extra storage because you can never have enough storage. And I love how it turned out. Remember, you can grab the plans for this in the description below, and I will see you next time with another fun project or tutorial.